Normally when I'm covering the strike stuff, I'm usually focusing on the actor side of things. There's been a lot more visibility recently on SAG-AFTRA, but this week I've got a couple of things specifically related to the WGA to cover. So let's go ahead and do that. And the first story that I've got here is an op-ed from the Los Angeles Times. I helped write the surprise Netflix sensation Suits. My reward? $259.71 by Ethan Drogan. So Ethan Drogan is a writer for Suits. Oh, and that's Meghan Markle. You know, I've never watched Suits, but I think I knew that she was in that show. In America, unprecedented success begets unprecedented wealth. When Michael Jordan wins 6 championships or Mark Zuckerberg invents social media, they earn billions. You can contest this, obviously, as we'll find out. And not only them, but also their teammates. The people whose contributions weren't just meaningful but necessary. In success, they get paid too, but not in Hollywood. Here, when you write for a show that becomes an unprecedented success, there is no such windfall. There's only a check for $259.71. It doesn't matter whether the show you helped to build generates 3.1 billion viewing minutes in 1 week across Netflix and NBC Universal's Peacock, setting a Nielsen record. It doesn't matter whether said show constitutes 40% of Netflix's top 10. $259.71. That's how much the Suits episode I wrote, Identity Crisis, earned last quarter in streaming residuals. Altogether, NBC Universal paid the 6 original Suits writers less than $3,000 last quarter to stream or our 11 season 1 episodes on 2 platforms. This is why they're striking for a quarter, and apparently Suits is doing really well on Netflix. The writer gets nothing. Look at me. I am a nobody streamer. Nobody watches me. And I am sitting, you can see that dono goal up there. I'm $285 toward my $1,000 new PC build goal. That's more money than this writer got for their episode of a very popular streaming show. This is why they're striking. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's pretty awful. They need their demands met. And speaking of their demands, one of the demands that the WGA has been harping on is a demand for larger writing rooms. Right now, a lot of shows are even doing away with writing rooms. They will just have their showrunner, and if they need somebody to go in and write an episode, the Suits will tell them, just pay someone like a day rate to write X number of pages. And then that's all they get. No writer room credits, no, staff writer job, just gig economy, basically, for writing. And if you remember a couple weeks ago, I did a segment on Variety about how Variety is owned by a company that also owns Dick Clark Productions, which is a member of the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which is the organization that represents all of the Hollywood studios that the guilds are negotiating with. And so here we have Variety very explicitly attempting to sow discord among the WGA. TV staff minimum remains key sticking point, but some in WGA privately grumble. Nobody asked for this. The Writers Guild of America responded on Tuesday to the latest proposal from the studios as the sides continue to try to resolve the 3-month-old writer strike. While the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers has made some concessions, including agreeing to provide streaming viewership data, the studio group has not agreed to a key WGA demand for a minimum staff size for TV writers' rooms. The AMPTP at first refused to even consider the idea, but in its latest proposal, it offered to give showrunners flexibility to hire a certain number of writers, depending on the budget of the show. The WGA, meanwhile, has continued to make clear that it wants a fixed minimum staff size for all shows. The two sides remain at odds on a host of other issues as well, but the TV staff size proposal is shaping up as a key hurdle to getting an agreement. The WGA places a premium on solidarity. Notice what they're going to be doing here. But within the guilds, there's been some private dissent over the proposal, with some showrunners telling Variety that they think it is the wrong fight and should not be the reason that the strike is prolonged. That some private dissent is doing some heavy lifting, because you'll notice as we go on here, they don't give numbers on how many people dissent. And here's a tricky thing. You're going to notice they say that they've interviewed several writers, but please keep in mind, they don't have anybody's names. The only people that they name are people who have spoken elsewhere about this. But let's go on. The guild includes 11,500 members, and in a group so large, it's natural that not everyone is going to see eye to eye on every issue. This is true. You're always going to have dissent within ranks. The SAG-AFTRA strike authorization vote was like 98%, so that was 2% who did not vote to authorize the strike. Of course, you're going to see some dissent, but just because you have a few outliers complaining doesn't mean that is the majority view of the guild. But Variety spoke with 7 writers with varying levels of experience, including several current or former showrunners who were willing to explain their opposition on the condition of anonymity. Several expressed concern that the guild's proposal would take authority away from showrunners. Nobody asked for this, said one prominent showrunner. Every showrunner I know is against this. It doesn't make sense to anybody. Convenient that there are no names here. Just an anonymous showrunner saying, oh, every showrunner I know is against this, then how come they aren't speaking out? If this wasn't such a popular sticking point, why wouldn't we hear more writers saying, we don't really want this, this isn't something we were asking for? Instead, you just have them under anonymity reporting to an AMPTP-owned paper. The WGA proposed in the spring that TV shows should hire a minimum of 6 to 12 writers depending on the number of episodes in a season. At its meeting on Tuesday, they agreed to reduce that ask by 1 writer, but would not forego the basic structure. Several showrunners told Variety they did not want to be forced to hire writers who are not needed. In its worst form, they say that would amount to featherbedding, an illegal labor practice in which employers are required by union rules to hire workers who do no work. It's creating make-work jobs, said another writer. This writer said he'd worked on shows where his contributions were essentially ignored, and he fears that's what would happen to writers who are hired under staffing mandate. It's an awful thing to go to work every day and know you're being paid to sit around and do nothing. It doesn't actually help your career long term, he said. I think that people think they want these guaranteed jobs, but from my experience, they really don't. It's a poisoned chalice. Sounds like you weren't... I'm just gonna say skill issue, dude. Like, if you're in a writer's room and you aren't doing anything there, like, maybe you weren't that good at it. maybe they were handing them off to people who could actually, you know, write well. The WGA also wants the writing staff to be guaranteed 3 weeks of work per episode and that half the staff is employed throughout production. In addition, the Guild is seeking a 20% increase in minimum compensation for writer-producers. The Guild argues that mandating these parameters is essential to preserving the writer's room from studio cost-cutting. We will not give up on any of those principles, Chris Kaiser, the co-chair of the negotiating committee, told Variety in an interview in June. Without any one of them, the whole thing falls apart. With the notable exception of Yellowstone creator Taylor Sheridan, no one has been willing to publicly oppose the idea of a mandatory minimum staff. Notice the phrasing here. No one has been willing to publicly oppose the idea of a mandatory minimum staff. At no point does this give statistics on the support for it. If they had the numbers, they would run them. They don't have the numbers. Instead, what they've got is a couple of people anonymously saying, hey, we don't like this deal. And we're going to get into how they wrote this article in a little bit, but let's get through it. The WGA has stressed the importance of solidarity during the strike, and some fear being branded a traitor to the cause. Supporters of the proposal have argued the showrunners are facing pressure from the studios to get by with as few writers as possible. That's particularly true in pre-Greenlight mini-rooms, where a handful of writers will be tasked with breaking an entire season of a show in just a few weeks. The WGA proposal is intended to codify a room size that had been standard on most shows for decades. It's not acceptable for the companies to just say, well, now we want you to do all the work with fewer people in a smaller amount of time, and that's fine, Ellen Stutzman, the Guild's chief negotiator, told Variety earlier this year. That's a major problem for television writers. Some opponents of the proposal say they haven't heard from showrunners who have this concern. Others acknowledge the validity of the issue, but say the proposed solution is misguided. Several said that the showrunners will likely end up just hiring their friends for no-show jobs. I imagine there will be a bit of that, but that's something that I'm willing to live with if it means that we get more writers in jobs. Even if a couple of them are going to be just the showrunner's friends who don't actually end up doing that much, that's better than the current situation where they're basically hiring a showrunner and saying, okay, you're the sole writer. If you need somebody else to write an episode, hire them for a day rate. For broadcast shows, which typically have 22 episodes, the WGA would mandate a minimum of 12 writers. Most shows already exceed that threshold, according to the showrunners who spoke to Variety. On streaming and cable, where seasons can run 8 to 10 episodes, the Guild would mandate 7 or 8 writers. I don't need that many writers, said one showrunner who was working on such a show until the strike began. I don't want some people coming in who have been mandated. If I'm forced to hire 2 or 3 more people, they will be seen as a burden by other people in the room. Are you sure about that? How many writers' rooms have the exact same writing team all the way through a show's multiple seasons. Writers come and go. This is, yeah, I'm sorry, this is nonsense. Another writer who works on limited series with one or two other writers at most argued that the guild should protect creative rights and compensation but not interfere in how showrunners do their jobs. It's the wrong fight, the writer said. Yeah, as Mixed Dizzy says in chat, the showrunner is not the only person who matters. Showrunners are not the only people of value. There are many other people who are required to run a thing. Yeah. I think showrunners, I mean, honestly, 20 years ago, most people didn't really know what a showrunner was. It wasn't really until, like, J. Michael Straczynski with Babylon 5, where he was like directly interacting with fans on Usenet forums, and then the cult of personality around Joss Whedon, where we started to really understand what a showrunner was. And since a TV show, like if a TV director is directing an episode, they're not directing the overall vision. So for a TV show, a showrunner is akin to what a director for a film would be. Media is not the product of like a singular person. There are hundreds of people who work on every single one of these things, and their contributions are all valid. This whole thing reeks of like the auteur theory of creative works, and I have severe issues with the way that we kind of venerate the auteur, especially when you look at people like Stanley Kubrick, who he made a lot of very respected works, but he was also incredibly abusive to staff. He was like in The Shining, where he like basically drove Shelley Duvall crazy with doing retake after retake after retake with her. There was like one scene where he made her shoot it 127 times until she was just breaking down crying. That kind of abuse, I don't accept that as something that is required for good art to be produced. I think you can have good art produced when everyone is working together and not just listening to a singular voice. Some supporters have said that writers' rooms give younger writers the opportunity to learn from more experienced people, but opponents have countered that may not be appropriate for all shows. Not all hospitals are teaching hospitals, one said. Another showrunner argued that there are creative reasons why writers' rooms might not work for every show. In some cases, the challenge is establishing a clear authorial voice, this person argued, and having too many cooks would make that more difficult. When you think of some of the most creatively daring shows on TV, many of them have been written by a single writer, the showrunner said. The more distinct the voice is, the better the show becomes. The WGA itself has lauded the creative achievements of solo writers. The Guild gave an award earlier this year to Mike White, the solo writer of The White Lotus. The Guild has also given awards recently to auteur-driven shows including Chernobyl, The Queen's Gambit, and Mare of Easttown. Solo writers are more the norm in the UK, which has recently produced Fleabag and I May Destroy You, two critically acclaimed shows written by Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Michaela Cole, respectively. Showrunners say the range of episodic series that are produced these days make it impossible to have a one-size-fits-all prescription. Each project is very different. Experienced showrunners know their needs on each project, the showrunner said. The anonymous showrunner, I should point out. I want to be in charge of my own show. I don't want to have my union telling me how to run my show. On the picket lines, support for the idea is easy to find. Many writers carry signs saying room size matters. Harry Rosen, a mid-level TV writer, told Variety Outside Disney in May that the issue is her top concern. I'm among the writers that have been having a hard time sustaining a lifestyle, she said. Having a required number of people on staff seems great. There are so many showrunners I know that would have loved to have more people on their shows but just didn't have the money for it. Writer employment surged during the streaming era, according to WGA data, rising 76% from 2008 to 2019, but the industry is now facing a contraction as streamers and studios have moved to rein in their content spending. Some of the showrunners who oppose the idea said they believe the support for it comes from writers who fear being left behind. When all is said and done, the estimates are that the number of working TV writers is probably going to shrink by 30 to 40%, said the writer who warned about make-work jobs. People are scared. People who staffed once in 2020 or 2019 and not since are really scared that they're not going to work again. They're right to be scared because it's a game of musical chairs and people are taking the chairs away. This is being promoted as a solution to that. I don't think it's viable. Yeah, I reject this guy. We don't even know who this writer is. We don't know what he's worked on. Several writers have said that they have been warned to keep any opposition to the proposal in-house so as not to undermine the WGA in negotiations, but they said their concerns had been ignored when they tried to engage with guild leadership. Okay, so I'm sure that has been some of the messaging in-house. I am sure they've been saying we need to have a united front. What this doesn't engage with is if it were actually unpopular among the WGA at large. then it wouldn't be a central tenet of their demands, right? If they announced it as one of the pillars of their plans for the WGA, and a big chunk of the guild membership said, no, we don't want that, then it wouldn't be one of the central pillars of the thing, okay? There is broad support. We're gonna touch on that in a minute, but there is broad support for this among the WGA. We are dealing with a minority of detractors, and they're a pretty small minority. They're so small that Variety can't even get names in here. Several said they are far more interested in getting a much improved residual on streaming platforms. The only issue that should be going on in a strike is money, 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 said the first showrunner, who argued that withdrawing the staff size proposal would help create momentum to get a deal. A seventh writer said he hoped the leadership got the message that the strike should not be prolonged over a staffing minimum. This is not the reason we should remain on strike, he said. I hope they're willing to drop it to get things that actually matter. Craig Mazin, who wrote Chernobyl by himself and wrote The Last of Us with Neil Druckmann, was somewhat cagey when asked about the staff size proposal by Variety in July. I may not agree on everything that the union is looking for, he said, but then again, if you agree on everything that your leaders put forward, you're probably just a robot. So this right here, this is the only named person that they're able to cite who spoke directly to Variety, and he didn't even speak to them for this article. He spoke to them for a different article here, which I'm not going to cover. So what Variety is doing is they are trying, and it really shows the, because like I said, Variety is owned by a parent company that also owns Deadline and The Hollywood Reporter, okay? They basically, Penske Media controls, you know, the entertainment news industry, okay? Those are like the three big industry rags. And they're all owned by one company, which is a member of the AMPTP. So what they're doing here is they are trying to sow discord, trying to get WGA members to back up on this one talking point, because I think this talking point is one that really scares Hollywood, and I think that's important to press on. But let's see some reaction to this article. Here we have Cheryl J. Anderson, runner of shows Mother of Geeks, Seeker of Truth, Beauty, and Laughs, currently showrunner Sweet Magnolias on Netflix. Monday, I was on the line at Amazon. My sign, room size matters. A man approached, said he was from Variety. Could he ask me some questions? I politely suggested he go check in and talk to a WGA captain. He pointed to my sign, but that's what I want to talk about. What's your stand on that? I said, I completely agree, and you should discuss it further with a captain. I pointed again to the check-in table. He walked away in the other direction. I am a showrunner, not that he asked or had any way of knowing, and I asked for this. Yeah, as we can see, this is very clearly, I mean, the person who approached her was probably the author of that article or another Variety worker who they were sending them out to try and get this. And then here we've got Travis Helwig, TV writer, host of, I don't know what this is, some podcast, okay. Co-creator of Edith, starring Rosamund Pike, former head writer for Crooked Media, and Adam Ruins Everything. I like that show. I also think it should be noted, when this demand was announced at the WGA meeting I attended before the strike, the auditorium erupted in cheers. Anyone who thinks writers are against this proposal has not been involved in the process. Now, this is one person's account, anecdotal. Again, we don't have the data on it. But if this were truly an unpopular thing, we would see more grumbling about it than just one Variety article with 7 anonymous interviewers. Hey, thanks for watching. I'm trying to get my channel monetized, so your view means a lot. Don't forget to toss me a like and subscribe and ring the bell. I stream every Monday and Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific, so catch me live and join in on the convo. You can find all my socials in the description below, and thank you to all my patrons with a special shout out to Piftle Cakes and Ryan D. Your support means the world. Catch you next time.